I'm Sarah Nagel. I've spent my career leading research and product development within some of the world's largest brands.
And I'm Chad Reynolds. I'm a serial entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Vurvey.
And this is AI Powered by People.
Each episode will dive into the latest AI developments and talk to an industry leader to help you better understand and utilize AI.
We'll take you inside some of the world's most famous companies and share examples of how AI is improving innovation, consumer engagement, media, and marketing.
No matter what industry you work in, we'll help you navigate one of the biggest disruptions to organizations and people today.
Hey, Chad, how's it going? How's your weekend?
It was amazing. How about you?
Amazing. What was amazing about it?
Well, I think anytime you could be outside, it's just like the weekend is more amazing than not. So we had lacrosse games. It's nothing like seeing a bunch of 8-year-olds run around with sticks trying to attack each other. How about you?
Nice. On Saturday, we went to my aunt's 80th birthday party, which was great. It was really fun to see. I have a big Italian family, so it was really nice to see folks. It was good.
And do family stay with you? I know you're picking up people from airports and all that.
My sister came up from the Carolinas, so yeah, she came up to surprise my aunt. So she was the only one that stayed with us, and then we all drove down to Massachusetts for the party. So it was really great. So coming up, we're going to be sharing an interview with Joshua Young, who is an expert in transforming organizations with digital tools. He spent the majority of his career working at Nike, recently at VF Corporation, working with Vans, North Face, and Timberland, and now consulting, and the head of circular fashion at the venture studio called Moonflare. But before we get to our interview with Joshua, let's take a look at what's in the headlines. So, Chad, there's a lot of music generators out there. Specifically,
keep them coming. Let's go.
I know. It's more. Like Chad's music dreams are coming true.
Au contraire.
Spotify and Amazon both have music generators. So Spotify Premium has released a beta that's in the UK and in Australia that can turn any of your ideas into personalized playlists. This is basically what you've been talking about that I am about, but you're
lame. It's lame.
It's lame. Okay, so it's lame. Okay.
It does not go far enough. That's all it is you just put in, your, I don't know how you're feeling, and it still creates a playlist. Like the end is a playlist. I don't want a playlist.
You want your own Chad music, that's created.
Yeah, I want something new. It doesn't have to be my music. It can be here's the arc of my day, and here are different meetings. Here's where I want to be creative. Here's where I need to feel regenerative, deep focus, those kinds of things. And I want something that creates, and I'm tired of hearing the same song over and over and over and over again. And just because you put the track in a different playlist doesn't make it any less monotonous. So I'm looking for just a new music experience, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
All right. So Spotify, listen up. Chad wants a...
No, lame is probably a strong word. I think it's more of the same.
Yeah.
And what I think the promise of AI has, and Spotify has figured out whether it's good or bad, they figured out a monetization structure and how they reward creators for their art. Whether it's enough, as that's another conversation, but they've figured that out. So it would seem to be that they would be the company to figure out how to turn what I want to create with music and monetize people in the appropriate way. I know you and I have differing opinions a little bit on this. I'm not sure how big the divide is, but
yeah. Okay. So Spotify still has, it's fine. I don't know. I can create I create my own playlist. Sometimes I just
Tom Jones.
So yes, I created a playlist this weekend for my aunt with lots of Tom Jones in it.
See?
Yes. But I feel like it does a good job anyway when I'm starting to create a list, because I want to know the songs that are in there, and I like the little suggestions that they have, so I add them as I want to.
But do you want to listen to it? I love the idea of creating a playlist for someone.
Yeah.
Right? It's the creation of that. Do you want to listen to a playlist over and over again?
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It just really depends. Sometimes, like, like if I'm in, so this is where we maybe differ. Like when I'm in like a gym mode, like I want the same, I like want some of the similar songs because that's
But it
works
signals
for me.
something. Yeah, but it signals like a point in time of like I'm at this part.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're using it as both
Yeah.
motivation, timekeeping, kind of framing what you're supposed to be doing at that moment.
Yeah. I'm just not into kind of creating like, I feel like inauthentic music is kind of what you're going for, is like, it's not actually created by an artist. That's the way I feel about it. Like, it's just like, it doesn't do it for me. Like
Yeah.
I'm
I
listening to
feel like,
vinyl. I'm like,
yeah,
I'm,
I don't know. I feel like there's an opportunity out there,
yeah.
but
Well, we'll see. We'll see. So obviously Spotify hasn't done it yet, and Amazon hasn't done it with Maestro either. So more to come there, hopefully.
what's Maestro?
Maestro's the Amazon Music. So it's kind of coming out at the same time as Spotify. So it's music generator or playlist generator as well. Also, Microsoft shows off VASA-1, which is an AI, they call it an AI framework. But basically what it is like you can input one single image and you can put in audio and it generates like a synced video from those pieces, and it just brings it to life. It's kind of like a lip sync in a way. So I've seen like the Mona Lisa singing songs. Like you can take, pictures of us. Like we could potentially do, take pieces, parts of the podcast with images of us to see like, if it could work as well. But I think it's pretty interesting. It's also really easy, it seems like, for people to be able to play around with it, where it's just like these two small pieces and then you just press play.
Do you remember Jib Jab?
No, it's Jib Jab.
Jib Jab was like all the rage, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago. You could upload a face and then put it to a song, and then it's like the elves would dance, and you would upload your family pictures, and then they would all create this like, I don't know, like interactive card, like online that you could play in little videos. You remember Jib Jab?
I don't remember Jim Jab. I do remember something like I don't know, maybe like 5 years back, where like you could, it was some app that I had where I'd put my dog on it and I'd make him say the like the SVU kind of like boom boom, and he would do like SVU. Yeah, I don't know why. I just like decided to put like Law and Order, like the intro to Law and Order in there. It was just really funny to see a bulldog doing the intro to Law and Order.
That's one of my favorite shows. now I'm watching intro and just think of your dog rolling over.
My dog. I'll send it to you. Yeah. So it seems like there's been things out there prior, but this is I don't know. You see it everywhere. People are playing around with it with different imagery and different kind of audio tracks. So I mean, you can think about that like, how did that extrapolates out to kind of longer form? Like this is, I think, like 30 seconds or something. It's pretty short, but you can think about, using this imagery, like series of imagery, to be able to create something longer form.
Yeah, I get more worried about those kind of tools than I do about all the other pieces, just because it's so easy to impersonate other people. But
oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there's other things too we're not talking about in the news too, where there's a lot of political stuff happening.
Yep.
With the elections, there's some interesting things happening there. So it is scary. It's fun to play with, but it is scary. Okay, now let's get to our interview with Joshua Young. He's a veteran in the fashion industry, an innovator within organizations leading digital product creation, customs programs, and rethinking how companies can digitize the end-to-end product creation process. I'm excited to talk to him about what happens after the the visualizers, or kind of like, these image generators are creating the kind of these concepts. He can talk a lot about what happens next and what organizations can do to think about like manufacturing, thinking about supply chain, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, this is really the second half of the problem. I mean, we're working mostly on the front end with consumer insights, product creation, different types of ideas, but at the end of the day, you have to make it. And so really excited to talk to Josh and see what that integration point looks like, and how do we API into the supply chain.
All right, you ready?
Let's do it.
Well, Joshua, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And you were calling in from Singapore this morning. Our time difference is pretty dramatic. We're about 12 hours difference right now.
Yes, but the temperature stays always the same. So somewhere around like 82 degrees 24/7. So it's lovely,
That
lovely that
that sounds wonderful.
way.
I would love to start with a bit of an introduction and background. I'd love to hear about kind of a bit about your experience and what you're doing now, so we can share
Mhm.
with our audience.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I've been in this industry, the fashion industry, a very long time. So I actually went to school to be a photographer, believe it or not, in the 80s. But in the mid 90s, started with Nike, helping them move from basically pen on paper design to designing on the computer with the Adobe apps applications. In early 2000, the year 2000, we started looking at how do we look at things differently? How do we look at things from beyond the 2D plane? And started looking at 3D creation. Did that for a while, and then started working in the Nike innovation team. One of the things that we worked on, like, it brought the first 3D scanner into Nike, and we started looking at how to do body analysis with it. So that was really interesting. Also using a lot of the 3D things that we've learned, and then 2010, we started building something called the Nike Digital Studio, which brought digital creation techniques to what I call the triad. So,
Oh, you were
you know,
part of the Nike Kitchen. I didn't
well,
realize that.
later, yeah. So that was that was even later. But yes, became part of the kitchen toward the end of my tenure with Nike.
Hmm.
But yeah, so Nike Digital Studio was on the early part, and that was specifically for that was not in the innovation kitchen, so to speak, but it was specifically part of the team that was working at bringing all of the sport categories up to speed with digital creation processes. So we would do 3D head to toe key looks with the merchandising team. We would do digital prototyping with the factories, and we onboarded a lot of vendors at that time as well. 2015, left Nike and I started consulting, which was really fun. My first One of my first jobs was with PVH, so going from sportswear to formal wear. It was great, wearing a tie for the first time in a really long time. So it helped them with their digital transformation. Worked with Carter's doing children's wear. Worked with Patagonia doing fabulous sustainable products, and then also worked on an innovation project with Lululemon, which was really fun. So I had a lot of fun doing that. And then in 2020, right as COVID hit, I decided, hey, let's join VF Corporation and move to Hong Kong. Showed up in Hong Kong a year later. They decided to move to Singapore, and that's the crazy story of how I ended up here. So I'm now actually left VF back in August, and I'm consulting now, and actually working on a passion project called Moonflare, where I'm advising a company on both how do companies create a circular supply chain, and then also how do they bring social justice to their supply chain as well. So a couple of that's my only plug for kind of my own projects tonight.
Gotcha. So how would you describe like the role that you bring to organizations?
Hopefully, I'm a subject matter expert that can help them with their business transformation. So a lot of times, a lot of people use the word digital transformation. I don't really like that term as much as I used to, because everyone thinks that digital transformation is about implementing technology, and it's not. It's about business process change, helped on, and with using the capabilities of technology. But the business process comes first, and the people come first. And so that's where I think I've earned both my expertise and my bread and butter is helping companies understand what they need to do to change the way they work. And then also, if a company did want to bring me on full time, I wouldn't necessarily turn them down either. So
Gotcha. So as far as AI in the fashion industry, how is it enabling brands to innovate in new ways? I know this is kind of a very high level, but how can you talk about how AI is kind of transforming how fashion brands are operating?
yeah, I think well, so first of all, I would say that there is still a lot of fear around AI in the marketplace, especially around fashion, because it is such a creative, physical industry. And so I think actually fashion has been a bit slower to adopt AI. Um, but I honestly think a lot of the fear is misplaced, because just like anything, just like Adobe back in the 90s, and 3D in the 2000s, AI is just the latest tool that will help us bring product to market in a more effective way. Um, what I think a lot of people don't realize is that we've been using AI in the industry for a really long time. there's something called generative design, which, boy, back in the early 2000s, a lot of companies, what they were using to optimize the footwear geometry. Basically, you told the AI to make me the lightest, most efficient structure for a shoe that you possibly can while still maintaining a certain amount of strength, and it would figure out a bunch of different options for you, and provide that to you. And they use that on planes, they use that on cars. And so AI isn't new. It's just a lot of the ways that we're using it are new, and certainly more sophisticated. But I mean, from my perspective, I think that AI, there's relevance to absolutely every part of the product process from concept to consumer, but all in a number of different ways. So I usually like to break out the product process into plan, create, make, and sell, which is, again, I think and we'll maybe talk about this later, but that's starting to be an archaic model as well. But if you're doing line planning, assortment planning, pricing, allocation, AI can help enormously with that. It's basically the most advanced form of analytics that you can use. For product creation within design, concepting, product development, there's AI opportunities there. I think one of the biggest opportunities is within the supply chain. How do you optimize your supply chain to get product to market as fast as possible, and at a lowest price, and even within the quality range? And then finally, in the sell space, there's so many different opportunities. Everything from AI-based customization to personas that help you understand who your consumer is, and what their preferences are, so you can offer them something that's going to be relevant to them, especially online. It's honestly I think the number of uses within the fashion industry is only limited by the number of use cases that you can dream up.
You were talking about the fear a little bit. How, and this is maybe to either alleviate or, potentially not for fashion designers, how do you think the role of the fashion designer will evolve in the future with these new tools?
I think that designers have always been somewhat of curators of, they look throughout the industry and they go on inspiration trips. They find out what inspires them. And I think especially, generative AI, things like Midjourney, those type of tools are fantastic for concepting, because designers, what this basically does, it gives designers an additional place for them to find inspiration. And that inspiration can become very, very quick as well. Whether, so instead of having to go to a fashion week, or maybe in addition to going to fashion week, or in addition to, visiting a country where they want to be inspired by, what's happening in the local culture, they can also explore a number of different concepts super quickly, just by typing in a prompt. And although that final design that comes off of the AI may not be the final product, it's just like anything else that they're using. There's inspiration. There's been a debate online, and I think it's an interesting point for designers to think about, is that because AI is, by definition, has to be trained on content, it's always going to produce something that's derivative of something else that's gone before, right? And I think there's still something to be said about coming up with something on maybe instinct, rather than just, something an idea that the AI threw out. And so I think it's a combination of both. I mean, I think if you're doing something that is, a basic design, like if you think about it another way. So we often classify things in fashion around good, better, best, right? There's the good process. We probably shouldn't be using AI to design it at all, because that should just be, it should be auto replenishment. The better would probably be really useful to use AI, so you can inform like which colors you should use and color combinations, and then maybe on your best product, using AI for some concepts, but in the end, probably throwing in some insights that are just plain your own as well. I think that's where you're going to push design forward, to a place where an AI would have not anticipated, because it's never been fed that information before.
Yeah. It feels like you can start to like kind of really move the process quickly. Like if you're, as a designer, you're putting in these prompts to be able to, to create a new shoe or to create a new bag or whatever. And then if you're getting all this inspiration, it's like helping you just kind of like, it's like a superpower in a way, is kind of what it feels like.
It's exactly, that's the word. That's the word actually been using for a number of different areas. And I think for merchandisers, it's the same. It gives your smartest people within your organization superpowers to analyze and interpret as much information, more information than they ever possibly could have done by themselves. It just so happens that now all of that inspiration is at their fingertips. If a merchandiser is trying to put together a line plan and they're not sure, how they should fill out their line plan, the AI can go out and gather, like what are their competitors doing, what appears to be popular on social media, what are some of the hot sellers absolutely right now, and then can identify where maybe you might be missing some of those ideas within your line plan. It's honestly again, use cases are somewhat endless, and there's companies that are doing that right now. I don't know if you want me to say any of them, but
I'm kind of curious, like who is utilizing it successfully right now?
Well, I mean, specific technology companies that are offering some of these. So there's a company called Stylumia, which is helping with line planning. You can actually put in, you can type in all of the parameters of the style, including a picture, and upload it to the AI, and it'll tell you kind of like with a line, like how popular does the AI think this style will be, which is just kind of an interesting idea. And then
Stylumia is what it's called?
Yeah, Stylumia.
Okay.
And can we put a link in the?
Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes. Definitely.
Good. And then another, for concepting, there's this tool called Newark AI. And the way it works is that a designer will create a traditional sketch. So they'll sketch up an idea, right? And then they'll upload it to the AI and they'll type in what they want that sketch to look like. This is a sketch of a brown leather shoe with a certain colored outsole using whatever. And then the AI will then take their design line and make it photoreal with all the colors and materials that the designer has asked for. So, again, it's the designer's concept, it's their thinking, it's what they're trying to get at, but they just, to get to that concept that they can share with their team as quickly as possible, this makes it an almost instant, an instant visualization of their design intent, which, from my perspective, is kind of what designers have always been looking for.
Can you talk about some of the companies that you've worked with that are utilizing this? Because I've worked at VF and kind of been in the industry, and I haven't heard about these tools, and I'm curious, like, who's using them successfully, if you can talk about it.
Well, I have to say there's a lot of companies are using them, but not a lot of companies are talking about them. It probably shouldn't surprise anyone that Nike has been very vocally investing in these tools. And I have a lot of friends there who had been uploading some of the first rather horrific images from some of the early generative AIs. And they were very cool. They were a bit terrifying, especially when the human faces were very distorted in the very early
hands.
Yeah. But, it was really interesting stuff. I mean, you could tell that there was a huge amount of potential there. And they were on this stuff before almost anybody else. The stuff that Nike is now doing, they just came out with a line of concepts. Actually, I take it back. They did not a line of concepts. They came out with concepts. I don't want anyone to think they're actually shoes that they can buy, but concepts for the Paris Olympics, where they basically fed in all of their sort of IP into the AI around the needs of an athlete. And different data, and of course the desires of the designer, and then the AI created a number of different concepts, and they're online. I think probably if you searched Nike AI Paris concepts, they're all kind of white and orange. They're really, really cool. So, and I think especially with other companies seeing that, I think a lot of people will realize that, okay, these things are going to become mainstream very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. What do you think this means for people who are non-designers in participating in the creation process? And this could mean an end user or, someone else that's kind of adjacent to, say, innovation or design within an organization.
Yeah, yeah. Well, everyone is always, ever since originally when I was at Nike, I worked with the used to be called Nike ID team way back when, and
Mm-hmm.
we actually went to a conference, and I was the representative from the apparel team, which we weren't doing very much apparel on Nike ID at the time. But one of the problems that people have always had with customization is that, and I hope nobody takes this in the wrong way, but most of us aren't very good designers. In fact, most of us are really bad designers. And I think, some of the stuff that came out of Nike ID in the early days um, was so bad that it was good, if that makes sense. So, the
Yeah.
people would wear stuff around and it was so hideous that, it was almost like the early forms of memes in some way. And so, it caught on. I think though that, if you look at Vans and their Vans Customs website where you can upload images, which I don't think you can do at the Nike for You, I think it's called now, and the Nike site. Can you imagine if even just giving an AI a very basic, even just feeding your AI all of the things that Nike has ever designed before, or that Vance has designed before, and saying, if someone says I want a green shoe that looks like this, then the AI goes and creates something that looks like something the brand would do within the parameters of what the manufacturing process can support. So I think, basically making all of us, designers. And by that same sense, I think it actually helps the brand, because then you get into this consumer co-creation thing where for the ideas that people create that, seem to be, you might even just have a page which shows everything that was created that day and people can like them or not.
Mm-hmm.
Then the things that those designs that get the most likes are maybe designs that they should bring into full scale production rather than just having them be a customs option. Nike's gotten to the point where almost every single one of their shoes is customizable, or a good percentage of them are customizable. And was looking at the website the other night with my other half, and she said, "Oh, they're out of stock on the red." And I said, "Well, why don't we just create a custom version and send it out and get a custom, just do it custom, because it's not that much more expensive." And so I was thinking, why is anything ever out of stock if it's a customizable product? You should just be able to order it either on a shorter timeline or a longer timeline. Like,
Mm-hmm.
offer every colorway to people. Don't have items listed as either a size or a color out of stock. I mean, just make customization the norm,
Mm-hmm.
and then offer people what you think are going to be the most popular, but don't limit people if they want to order a different color of a shoe that you would have available in a customs option. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe we
So
should
like
begin.
everything on demand?
Exactly, because it's what it is. I mean, that's really, especially with a customs website, that's really what it's become. So if you've got like Vans and Nike have set up an enormous infrastructure around customs, and so there's certain of their classic styles that should never be out of stock on almost any colorway because they can all be created from scratch.
How do you imagine that AI is going to transform kind of that structure of the process that you were talking about?
This is a bit of a long explanation, so maybe we'll break it up into a couple of different parts. But I think if you look at innovation, maybe this is a good place to start with this. Innovation used to be about materials and construction. So in other words, you innovate in materials, make them either find a material that is more warm or keeps you warm while wicking sweat or something like that. Something that's more efficient, lighter is always a big goal. And on the construction side, put together something in a way that will either make you faster or more comfortable or what have you. With a few, which we'll probably talk about later, with a few exceptions, we've kind of hit the long tail of innovation, when it comes to material and construction innovation. There's only so many things that you can do. And so I think that if we really look at what are the biggest opportunities for what I would call, additional revenue or getting people excited, it really comes around process innovation. And the problem with process innovation is that if we use the same techniques and operations and technologies that we've always used, it's going to be very difficult for us to make those changes. And so, if we look at, like, for instance, if we look at ultra fast fashion, everyone says, well, ultra fast fashion is bad because it just throws a lot of really poor quality product onto the market. It uses, forced labor and, so on and so forth. The materials are unsustainable. But to me, ultra fast fashion isn't a bad concept. It just hasn't been executed well. So in other words, highly relevant product being brought to market very, very quickly is a really good idea. How it's been done, I think, is the problem. And I think that's where AI can help us. So for, right now, it was funny. I was at I was teaching a class of people, just sort of pro bono, who on kind of the fashion industry, who had never, didn't really know anything about fashion. And I asked them a question: how long do you think it takes the fashion industry, most mainstream companies, to bring product to market, like Nike, Vans, and North Face, from the start of when they first start working on the product line to the time it delivers to the consumer? And one person said, I don't know, 6 months, and another person said a year. And I said, well, try 15 to 24 months as kind of the standard. And like, you could just see their minds blow. I mean, like jaws drop. Especially kids, and they were, college students, they just can't imagine that. And then by the same token, you say, how fast can Shein bring product to market? And you say, probably in some cases a week or less, and their minds equally blow, because how is that even possible? And so I think, how do we bring high quality, highly relevant product to market in a way that is true to your brand identity and aesthetic, in a very, very quick way, so it's meaningful to the consumer? And I think, to me, that's the innovation problem that more than anything else that AI can help solve, as well as just thinking differently about the way we bring product to market.
You're talking about this like 15 to 24 month process, which, those of us in the industry are very familiar with, where you're like, okay, you start to think about like trends in a different way. And like, how, will people like this in 2 years? But also, through AI, it's really interesting. And we've been experimenting with it also, is, trying to chop that process down. So in the concept development part that you've been talking about, becomes, I wouldn't say simple, but it becomes, you can understand how it can work, where you're, even as a researcher, we're able to go out and collect a lot of data really quickly. We're able to transform that into potential concepts. And, you can do that relatively quickly if you have the right platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Where it gets really interesting beyond that is like what you were talking about with like innovating in the supply chain and thinking about kind of actually creating the product. That's where I think there's a lot of opportunity. And I think you said that as well. Can you talk about, some potential innovations that you see to be able to shorten that part of the process? So we have the upfront kind of idea creation, but then there's the actual making it. Like, it's in the hand of the developers. It's moving into that process. Curious kind of what you've seen there and kind of the things you've been thinking about in that space.
Yeah. I think the entire process. So, I mean, I mentioned AI for planning. I think the way we start our product process probably needs to change a bit. And again, using AI to identify what are maybe some of the opportunities within the line plan, and then very quickly tossing that over to a designer, who then quickly uses AI to come up with concepts. Within a day, is socializing them with the team. Once everyone's gives that the green light, There's tools. Here's another company for you. A company called Six Atomic, which is probably the coolest name for an AI company there is. But what you can do with Six Atomic, you can train their AI on your entire block library, and then so it knows your fit and your what your patterns look like, and then you can type in,
And for
so
the listeners, the blocks are kind of the body shapes
yeah, so
to
the
be able to kind of
blocks.
understand
Yeah.
sizing.
See, thank you for catching me on my industry lingo. So yeah, so the blocks are basically shapes, pattern shapes. Like your parents, if they were gonna to sew something together for you, they might go down to Cloth World and buy those paper patterns in the old days. It's those kind of things, these paper patterns, right? So you have these patterns that are that are standardized for certain product types. Like a T-shirt. This identifies what your fit looks like for all of these different sizes. So you have that, and you can feed that into, and you have that for hopefully, ideally, for a lot of your products. Some companies don't, but that's a whole other can of worms. And so once you have that fed into the AI, you can simply start saying, okay, I have this concept, and I came up. I was thinking, what is something that is completely off the wall that a lot of companies wouldn't have done before that might be an interesting concept to explore? So I'm just going to say my concept is a warm weather formal wear, because here in Singapore it's impossible to find like formal wear that you can wear out in the heat. So that's my new idea. Okay, I'm working on a warm weather formal wear, and so you can type in maybe what would be, or a very specific jacket made out of a specific material that you want, and kind of some interesting things about it, in terms of the sleeve length and so forth, and venting that you want in certain places. And then the AI will develop some concepts for you, right? And you can say, okay, I like this concept. Let's go forward with this. And then what Six Atomic does is it uses your block library, and then the concepts it's just developed, to build a pattern and then put it in 3D and get it ready for simulation. So all you have to do is press simulate, simulates, and then you have a 3D simulation of the garment and a matching tech pack to go along with it. Just, again, mind blowing.
Wow.
And so at that point, okay, all right, well, do I want to make any changes to it? So you might, again, using ChatGPT, go through some additional changes, make some additional changes to that. But at that point, you've got a photoreal image of it that you've produced by the generative AI. You've got a 3D model of it, which has all of your tech pack specifications, which was generated by computational design and machine learning. And you're ready to move forward. So the question is, in the next step, do you just bring it to market in the way that we've always done, or do you, maybe this is another point where you should do some consumer co-creation? So maybe there's a process where you send out, not just for consumer insights, but actually crowdsource those designs with your consumer to see what people like. What do the influencers like out of what you're thinking of creating? Maybe they didn't like the the warm weather cummerbund, but they're really excited about like the warm weather bow tie, for instance. Mm-hmm. And so so those things might move forward. And if you're selling online, that may be a case where you simply get it ready for production with off the shelf pre-positioned materials. And then when it gets an order, you start producing these things. Or if you're sending these things into retail, you can send maybe a small run that will last you, let's say, a week into retail. And if it starts selling out, then you go into production, replenish that, and put that back into the stores. Because if you have a very able and agile manufacturing process, even if it's more expensive than typical, you still will be able to get that product and keep either a zero inventory if you're online, or a near zero inventory if you're retail, and obviously a combination of both if you're doing both, so that you have the most responsive way to bring product to market. And you could combine that with nearshoring and onshoring, local supply chains.
So, traditionally there's large factories in Asia where a lot of our stuff is being made. We're starting to see some come back to kind of like Central America, and there's some things happening there. but also you're starting to talk about like local. So what does this mean for kind of where and how things are going to be made in the future?
Yeah, I think this is where, again, where I think AI can play a really interesting role, and it can determine what is the best option for your supply chain. So a lot of decisions, especially within sourcing teams, the teams that decide where things should be produced, um, are really made just from experience, which is great. But again, you have a lot of different variables. You know, the where the raw material comes from, how much is the raw material, how much does it take to ship the raw material from wherever it is to where it needs to be manufactured, the location of the factory, and how much it costs them to manufacture, and how long does it take, and then how long does it take for them to ship, once it's done, for them to ship that product into market. And then, oh, by the way, if there's tariffs involved, how do you manage all of that along with the pricing of everything that you have to deal with? Um, and so there's a lot of complexity there. And so AI could help you figure that out. A lot of companies will say that, well, we've tried nearshoring, but you know the local companies that we worked with, maybe they couldn't pick up the knowledge as fast. You know, the production facility that we had in the country X was maybe not as high quality as the one that we were using in China, for instance. I think that's kind of a bad excuse. I mean, that's easy for me to say that, but you know, I think that there's so much value in being able to have a short supply chain and to not use air freight, and to be able to get relevant product to market so quickly that it almost can't be an option anymore. Especially using automation. I mean, can you imagine? You know, if you had a small manufacturing facility, you know, out in California, you know, in the Central Valley, and you picking cotton, you know, turning it into a material, going into manufacturing, and literally being able to produce product in a week. Or shocking, maybe having production in South Carolina where the actual cotton resides. I think now is the time when we have the tools in place, especially with AI, to be able to gather the insights so that we know and can be more confident about the products that we're designing and making. That if we have onshore, slightly more expensive production, that it makes a lot of sense. And there's no reason why you can't produce the same product in the US that you're producing in India, that you're producing in Brazil, that you're producing in Morocco, you know, and have it be for those local markets and not have to be shipping inventory all across the world.
Yeah. And it feels like the time is right too. Like I just watched this documentary, and if you got it in Singapore, it's called Brandy Hellville, which is a new documentary that's out. That's basically just kind of a reflection. It's, you know, about Brandy Melville, but also just about the fast fashion industry and kind of like, you know, the desire to create things really quickly and kind of where all that stuff ends up. Like you said, I think that the hypothesis is great, you know, being able to give people what they need really quickly. So being able to utilize AI to be able to solve parts of that problem just feel very timely right now. I know we've been hearing about it for a long time, and there's a lot of like, you know, a lot of problems with kind of the environmental impacts and kind of like a human impacts. So it feels like it should happen soon. And if we can utilize AI to be able to do that, it seems like a really good time.
The other thing that I think a lot of people will say about fast fashion is that it's not just that the product that they're making is very cheap. And so the materials that they're making with are probably a bit inexpensive, and they're probably not very sustainable in a lot of cases in terms of the way they're made. And so I think this is where AI can potentially help solve some of those problems. I mentioned earlier that I said that the lot of the innovation was no longer in material and construction innovation, but there was a few exceptions. And I think this is where some of those exceptions lie. So if you go onto the Patagonia website, and I love Patagonia to death, some of my best friends work there. and they've done amazing things in the marketplace. And if you go on their website and look at their most popular products, they're made out of recycled polyester, which is great. I'm great they're using recycled polyester. Even recycled polyester is still, takes a lot of energy to bring that to market. And it's still, if it ends up in a landfill, it's still not going to biodegrade as quickly as cotton. And, it still has problems with microplastics that get out into the environment and the fish and into the food chain. So, but you ask the question, why do you continue to use these plastic-based products? And it's because the answer is because I can't get the performance that we require out of bio-based materials. And so that's a very difficult problem to solve. And I think this is an ideal place where AI, specifically the generative design that we were talking about earlier, can really help us understand, okay, what crops, if you're looking at, flax and birch and cotton and hemp, what combinations of these, how can we make these into the performance materials that, that we desire? Even with leather, there's a company in Mexico making a substitute leather made out of nopal, which is a prickly pear for us in the United States. That's both supposedly very, very good. But, it shouldn't take two brothers from Mexico, fiddling around in their backyard to figure out how to make a vegan leather that's actually bio-based. We should be able to solve those problems very, very, very quickly in other ways. And so I think that's a big unlock. The other unlock comes to, and this is probably going to be pretty controversial, the way we construct garments in general. So for as long as there's been clothing, we've been using cut and sew methods to make our clothing. The problem with that is that it inherently causes waste because you have a big sheet of fabric, you cut your pattern pieces out of the fabric, and even if you use an AI algorithm, to optimize that as much as possible, you're still going to end up with, I think it's anywhere between 15 to 20% wasted fabric. So all of that fabric just turns in excess fabric turns into industrial waste. So what's the answer? Well, there's the very well-known technology currently called circular knit manufacturing, which creates what a lot of people call seamless garments. So that's where you actually knit a garment all in one piece. If you think about socks are circular knit. Yeah, they just knit in the tube, right? And you just cut the thing off at the end, and you've got a sock. And I think you have to do one stitch, and that's pretty much it. You can make some really nice looking tops and tights that way as well with knit products. But there's been limitations. It's a slower production process. It's also very hard to figure out how to design something that looks correct by programming in the knitting instructions. You literally have to program a computer with the knitting instructions to be able to make something large. That's typically been someone who requires years of training to be able to do that and still can't get their prototypes right the first time out because there's so much variation in the process. If you were to train an AI on how to do this programming and put in all of the variables in that process, you could probably get a very much higher hit rate on the designs that you create, probably have a lot more freedom in what you design. There's a company called Unspun, which is working on the same problem, but for woven products. So knit product is, kind of like a sweater. Woven woven fabric is more like what you get with jeans. Jeans are typically a woven fabric. And so they're working on this problem with woven. And my understanding is they're looking at basically AI to solve that same black box. How do you 3D woven garments that you could literally knit a pair of jeans, or weave a pair of jeans all at once?
Well, it seems like there's a lot of really cool technologies and a lot of like new ways to think about how AI can impact the fashion industry. What do you kind of looking ahead 5 to 10 years? Maybe we'll just say 10 years in the future. How do you see where's AI's place, and also where's the human place in this process?
Yeah, if I only had a crystal ball, you know.
Because it moves so quickly, but it
Yeah.
just yeah.
Well, it doesn't. That's the contradiction around a lot of these things. When I started looking at 3D digital creation back in the year 2000, I thought, oh, 5 to 10 years max. This is the way we're going to be doing things, and we're still designing with Illustrator. You know, I said, I can remember myself saying we're probably not going to be using Illustrator in 5 to 10 years, and here we are, 5 to 10 years later, still using that. And so and the same thing with the process. Oh yeah, we'll be down below 10 months bringing product to market. In a couple of years, piece of cake. We can figure this out, and here we are. And so, I don't know. I mean, I think that we need to go to bio-based materials. We need to have a supply chain that is not abusive to people, but I like to call people planet friendly. We need to be quick to market. We need to be able to make decisions much more quickly. And I think AI can solve a lot of these problems. Um, the biggest hurdle is not the technology. The biggest hurdle is people and their willingness to change. There's this speaker called Guy Kawasaki. He used to be the evangelist for Apple, and he has this great speech on innovation. And one of the things that he talks about around innovation is that you need to be able to jump from one curve of innovation to the next. Because once you get toward the end of that innovation curve, you're basically doing operational excellence at that point, right? You're just making the same process slightly better, which isn't really going to give you a lot. You have to jump to the next curve of innovation. Most people can't do that. Most companies can't do that. He talks about ice farmers in the 1820s that farmed ice. None of those ice farming companies became ice factories. And then all the ice factories used to make ice and then ship it around town. None of those ice factories became refrigerator makers. They all died out when that next wave of innovation came. And so that's, I think, the problem that we face now. Are you going to be a company that jumps from this long supply chain, 24 months time to market, to a super lean, less than 3 month concept to consumer supply chain, and do it in a way that is, friendly for the planet and friendly for people? I think that's the biggest challenge that the fashion industry needs to solve. And in some ways, the EU might even legislate that we do it sooner rather than later. So who knows? Maybe the EU comes to our rescue in that regard.
Let's see. Well, Joshua, this was really fun. Thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. It's been fun.
Well, that was a fun interview with Josh. I did do that one on my own because I think you were traveling for either Google Next or Possible. So there's some cool things that came out of it. And, we've had conversations with him since. Again, I was talking about the product creation process. He has a lot of insights about, every step of the process, even kind of from the, from the beginning all the way through. I thought it was cool to be able to expose kind of the timelines and how you can really speed up the process, not only from the beginning part that we've been talking about, but beyond as well.
Yeah, I mean, even just looking more towards like localized manufacturing, which I'm sure people understand that there's a lot of waste and sustainability concerns, but I think getting this right has major implications across pretty much any industry that manufactures things. Mm-hmm. Especially when you look at fast fashion or getting products and goods that are localized to different markets and getting them faster. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think it's someone's going to put together a whole infrastructure around how to make that happen. And I think we have some good examples of where that's going well and maybe some that aren't necessarily there yet. but it is a combination of trends, insights, locations, culture, people, personalization, all those different things. And it's just exciting to see him, working through that. And we're obviously going to collaborate a lot more on that too.
Yeah, and it was cool that he did mention, fast fashion, and he's just like, fast fashion, just, he believes in the hypothesis. It's just executed really poorly. You can tell also he's working in sustainability right now, and there's, obviously the backlash there with fast fashion. But really thinking about, like you said, like localizing and really thinking about, I mean, AI might be the answer to what true fast fashion, like responsible fast fashion could be.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it's really cool. He's got just so much insight. I think, we had collaborated when we were at VF Corporation. So, he was working on digital product creation there and really helping to transform across brands what they were able to do. And, it's tough within a large organization having, one or two people that are doing this. But I think now that the tools are more available to folks and kind of within brands, I think that they can really take the next steps here and really think about every little piece of the process and how can we speed those up? Because at the end of the day, that's like millions and millions of dollars saved each season.
Yeah. Plus, even just when you're kind of through wearing it, just looking at I don't know, just AI could mean so much more for also like post-purchase and then kind of the secondhand marketplaces where it still feels like a dumpster dive.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been to Filene's basement in Boston. Have you been there?
Oh yeah. Wow. Blast from the past.
I know. I don't know where that came from, but it was always the promise of like finding something good. But it was, it was a cluster getting there. So, which I feel the same way about like secondhand, like a Poshmark and those kinds of things. It's still, I don't know, that experience is, any of those experiences don't necessarily feel well because it's still like searching for a needle in a haystack when you feel like the interface should be designed around you and what you're looking for. And I don't feel like any of the interfaces are yet.
No, they're definitely not. There's still going to be those people that love the hunt, though.
Yeah.
They love that.
Not me.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of AI Powered by People. The show is produced by Steve Berkowitz and brought to you by Vurvey. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next Tuesday.